So, do you think foreigners have privilege in China?
Of course. Surprise! White people have privilege, also in China. Welcome back to our channel, everyone. Today we will be discussing foreigners' privilege here in China.
The latest news of foreigners receiving special treatment. There's a lot of news going on recently. For example, there's a university in Jiangxi province. They plan to spend more than 140 million renminbi for only 200 international students.
Yeah.
1.4亿在南昌市能买1万平米的商品房，这还盖啥楼啊？直接买不就完事了？
And also the news that BMW at the Shanghai car exhibit, they gave ice cream to foreigners for free, but they refused to give it to Chinese.
Yeah, I saw this news too. It was quite big everywhere and people were super mad because it was just that you could get a free ice cream, so of course people started lining up, but they only gave it to foreigners and refused to give any to anyone that was Chinese. It's so stupid.
Yeah. And also, there's a Chinese airline. They waited for their foreign passengers, but not Chinese.
Yeah. Like they refused the Chinese passengers that were also equally late to get on the airline, but they let the foreign passenger on, even though they were also late. But yeah, these things, it's not just right now that it's been happening, it's an ongoing thing. I just think Chinese people have started speaking up against it more.
And these are just very small part of the stories.
On a social level, so that means like day-to-day life in like the social sphere around other Chinese, I would personally say that it's only really white foreigners that receive privilege.
So on a governmental level, the main thing would be centered around education and investment.
Yeah, so we've talked about this before because Shay went to a very good university here in China. It's rated in the top 5. I think it shares the number 3 spot with multiple other universities. So you saw firsthand that Chinese students and foreign students didn't receive the same treatment. Yeah.
International students, they got into the university easier. Like the requirement itself is already very, very different. You know, like Gaokao is very competitive, but they don't need to go through that.
Yeah, the Gaokao is the entrance exam.
Yeah.
For university, for those that don't know.
So, for example, if Chinese students go abroad, let's say America, they still need to pass SAT.
Yeah.
Like
you're still competing on an equal playing field, but here, for example, to get into Tsinghua University, China's #1 university, for a Chinese student, it's like nearly impossible. You need to be a pure genius.
Yeah.
Like for most people, studying hard is not enough, you know.
I was an ordinary person who studied hard. There's no miracle, people.
But for mediocre, kind of smart people abroad, I would say they can't get in.
Yeah, I won't say it's super easy for international students to get in, but let's say the competition level is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I would say, on average, the foreigners that get accepted into these top universities here just don't measure up to the same level. And they're not expected to, which is what makes it a bit unfair.
And also, most international students, if they pass the language exam, the HST, they receive scholarship, you know, they receive money from the government.
Yeah.
And it's quite a lot of money. A lot of people got like more than 100,000 a year. Yeah.
And I've seen some people that are studying like for their masters here, they even get like complete free apartments that are in these really nice buildings, I would say, that are actually made for professors of the university.
Yeah.
While Chinese students just don't have this opportunity. So
at the same time, Chinese students live in those small dorms with 3 to 5 to 7 roommates. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say most Chinese students are very mad.
I get it. Like, I will defend it with the fact that, like, as a foreign student, what you need to pay to stay at the university, if you're not on a scholarship, is a lot more than what a Chinese student is paying. But that's the norm in pretty much every country. If you want to go to university in Canada, I think you pay double the price of a Canadian student.
Yeah.
So it seems a little bit unfair that they would then receive like a way better quality of dorms, a way milder study environment, because you've talked about yourself that professors expect less from the students from abroad.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, some international students are very hardworking.
Yeah.
I've seen it, but some other international students, they don't work hard, or they don't even work hard on their language ability. In China, a lot of them can't speak fluent Mandarin. Then it's hard for them to perform good in class, and they would beg those professors to let them pass.
Yeah.
And sometimes the professor just let them pass. I don't think that's a equal study environment.
No.
It's not good for each side, you know. Chinese students feel very bitter, and they feel like they don't want to make friends with these people. And these people, they don't get close to Chinese students too.
Yeah.
I think the universities and the government, you're not trying to create an equal environment for just students.
And I bet a lot of foreign students would appreciate a more equal study environment as well.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think most of the students really want this special treatment necessarily. I'm sure some do, but there's certainly also people that would appreciate not having Chinese students be annoyed at them for being there. But I think it's important that we add into it that these top universities accept this amount of foreign students because for you to be recognized as a top university by these foreign lists, which is what all of these like top universities is ranked by Western standards.
Yeah.
They need to accept a lot of foreign students, and for a country like China, which is not that popular in the media, to get more students to come, you need to offer them more advantages, you could say. So it is hard to make it fair and still have these universities recognized by the world, which sucks, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Because Tsinghua, Beida, Zhejiang are all amazing universities and should be recognized as such. But on a social level, however, I would say something that you see a lot is that there's an oversaturation of white models, like so disproportionately, and it does not make sense because, for example, I was actually recruited way before we knew each other to come to China and be a model. I said no to that offer for many reasons. But no matter what, like my body proportions, and I'm quite a thin person, I would say, I just don't have the same proportions that the average Chinese woman has, even if we're equally thin. We just don't have the same proportions, and clothes won't fit the same. And with makeup, for example, I experience here that makeup looks very different on me because my skin tone and lip color is different.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't really personally make sense to me that you would choose for white people to represent a brand that's being marketed to Asians. If it's being marketed internationally, I get it, that you should have a variety. But then you should also have black models, to be honest, if you're marketing to the West at least.
Yeah.
And that
so both don't make sense.
No, it doesn't. At least to me, it doesn't. And they all represent a very specific type of white beauty, I would say.
And that white beauty is not very popular in the West.
No, and they also, I've seen foreign models talk about it, that they get edited in very odd ways and they don't even look like themselves. So it's like a little bit of an odd in-between section. But I feel like it's very unhealthy for women here to see these like white women being represented as what is beautiful, because I feel like each country should represent beauty as something that's obtainable to those people. For example, I could never look like a Chinese woman. No matter how much surgery I would get, I would always end up with like a weird creepy result, I think, because I just am not a Chinese woman, you know. And a Chinese woman also couldn't look like me even with surgery because we're too far apart. And she shouldn't try to. We should all just appreciate the beauty that we have in our ethnicity. Another area where I feel like honestly white women especially need to like fess up a little bit and see reality is that there is a very big difference in how we get pressured with beauty standards when we live here
Yeah.
versus how Chinese women feel. Because I've seen, like, I'm with a Chinese man, so I also see other white women that are with Chinese men. And when they talk about, like, people make them aware of, like, the pressure to be skinny here, they say, oh, no one has ever told me that I'm big. And I've been in the comments being like, because we are Caucasian, so people give us more grace, I would say. People also less like to just tell you like, oh, lose some weight. 你很胖. like what kind of like stranger is just gonna go like touching your stomach, you know? Like these things are just different because you're a foreigner to people, and people do have a white filter sometimes. I even admit, like, sometimes when I get a lot of compliments on here, he does not agree with me because he loves me. But people compliment me, I think, too much on what I look like, where I would consider myself not deserving of this level of praise. I appreciate it, but I also like sometimes people have a white filter for me as well. And I think it's important sometimes just to be a little bit self-aware that you do get a lot of praise because Western beauty has been pushed as an ideal because of stuff like Hollywood.
And there's one thing I've noticed. Foreigners, their bad behaviors got forgiven easily by people. Way easier.
Where if you were Chinese, you'd be called like uncivilized for acting this way.
Yeah. Or people are not very outspoken about foreigners' bad behavior. For example, when they're drunk, they're very rude.
They destroy bars.
Some foreigners will use cultural difference as a shield.
Yeah.
When they're dating. So foreigners definitely have easier time to date people here.
Because I think people view someone like me, this sounds funny to me because I'm from the West, but it's a little bit exotic to say like you're dating a Caucasian person, like someone from the West. To some people that's an experience.
Yeah. So I think for people who have the fetish and people who are just curious, I think both exist. And also foreigners have a lot of privilege if they go clubbing a lot. For example, a lot of clubs here in Shanghai, whatever the place, give them free pass. And they can just go for free. And they can have a drink for free.
Like, I've gotten messages on Xiaohongshu from clubs in Shanghai especially, like being like, oh, come to us, like, we'll take care of you, like, we'll give you, like, special promotion stuff. And it's a bit awkward because I get why they're doing it, but it makes me personally feel a little bit weird.
For those business owners, of course, they're not gonna do it for nothing. Because it attracts more customers.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because a lot of people still have this white fetish or look up to white people.
Yeah.
Or they just give white people privilege automatically. So that's the norm. That makes the business owners make more money.
Yeah, and it promotes this falsehood that just because there's white people in the picture that this club uses to promote, that this club is somehow more upscale.
Yeah.
Where I gotta say, for me as a foreigner, personally, if I see a business that posts a bunch of people that look like me in a club setting, I have a very negative image instantly because I'll be like, you're trying to sell my people in like a compromising way. Like, it just gives me like an ick. It makes me uncomfortable. I consider it a bit trashy.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people, we've kind of just touched on it a little bit, but like, why is this such a thing? And I think a lot of Caucasian people already kind of be a little bit self-aware and say colonialism must play a role in this to some extent.
Yeah.
But you brought up, when we discussed this ahead of filming, you brought up some very good points, I think.
Yeah, I think, of course, colonialism played a role here. But I don't think that's the main reason. I think it's just because after the economic reform in the late 70s and early 80s, people saw the gap between China and the West.
Yeah.
And that made a lot of people feel very vulnerable and very sad, very destroyed.
Yeah, a lot of people got the mindset like we're not as good as the West.
Yeah. A lot of people started to look down on themselves, especially educated people.
Yeah.
That's very funny thing. So a lot of people think anything in the West is the best So they start having this weird filter on foreigners or white people. And another thing is, rich people or officials in this country, when they see foreigners as their guests, so they want to treat their guests good. But at the same time, they feel like they're equal with those guests.
Yeah.
And people in lower class are lower than them and their guests. This mindset creates a lot of governmental or official level privilege, I think.
What's more amazing is that heavy snow covered all the roads in Beijing last night. But today, we saw no ice or snow on the tens of miles of road we traveled. How could the Chinese do that without snow polo?
People want to act they are 好客, welcome their guests.
Yeah. A good host.
Yeah, but it became this type of 媚客 behavior that you're kind of simping your guest.
You become a Western simp.
Yeah.
This term is quite common, I would say. I think it's a bit sad. Like, I've heard many examples of this because I know quite a few people that went to China to work for periods of time or went here for business. And I'll say the behavior of these like very wealthy men who own these businesses, often in like what I consider blue collar industries, like production industries, will invite their foreign male guests to party in very like shady clubs where you can treat women quite badly. Like there's hostesses. And it promotes this idea that's already very prevalent in the West, unfortunately, of like Asian woman is a tool. Asian woman is like an obedient, shy woman that will serve you. And it gives people this very like low image because after all, like in the West, you wouldn't promote treating your women like this. So when you see Asian men promoting this, a lot of people get a bad image of the women and the men equally. And that's hypocritical because these men obviously use this opportunity to do some shitty things, like these white men that come there. Like they don't leave the club, you know? So it's very hypocritical of them. I'm not defending that behavior. It does leave a lot of people talking shit about China. Like they don't come home saying like, oh, the host was so graceful. No, they talk about like, oh, it's so like shady and like low. So it doesn't give you the result you necessarily want.
And also, you gotta know this. When these foreigners first came here, they didn't have an idea they would have privilege.
Yeah.
So when they already had these experience for treatment from people, they like it or not, the message would be sent back to their home country. Oh, you can be someone. You're nobody here, but you can be a privileged someone in China. And this will attract bad people.
Yeah.
The only people who want this privilege will come. But people who don't want privilege, people who want to treat people equally, they definitely don't want to be in a country like this.
If you follow any people who are ABCs, you might have heard them talk about LBHs, losers back home.
Yeah.
A lot of these people recommend like, oh, come to Asia, like the girls will be flooding to you. Oh, mediocre women, you can like find a lot of hot men that are willing to date you. A lot of people have this image of East Asia as a whole, not just China. And it's very, like I've even gotten told by people I know when I came here, I was like, oh, I can come visit you because everyone, like all the men will just think I'm hot. And I was like, why would you think that? And my friend said like, oh, because I'm white. And I had to be like, hold up, like that is the worst take ever. And I was like, sis, no, do not think this way because it's not real. I'll say that there is again a white filter, so some people, but those people I also think aren't necessarily high quality individuals.
Yeah.
Those people probably do have a fetish or aren't like, would you really want to date someone that has a low self-image of their own people? I don't think that's healthy. I wouldn't like it if he was like, oh, look at me, I'm dating a white woman.
Yeah, it's so
now
weird.
I'm a better man than I was before. That would be so awkward.
Yeah, some people have a foreign partner. They act like that.
It's a bit, ooh.
Yeah.
Sorry.
They act like they're higher than other people. It's so weird.
I don't mean to offend anyone because I think there's a lot of like very awesome mixed couples. I'm friends with someone who's also in a mixed relationship and they're awesome. There's just some people that give me a bit of a But I agree with you, like most foreigners I think that come here to live here especially don't want this special treatment. I really don't enjoy it. And it puts you in a weird spot.
So because of this special treatment situation, there are people who treat foreigners really well. They give them all kinds of privilege and they look up to foreigners. They have this white filter or whatever. And there's some people that really hate this. I would say me included.
Yeah.
But it creates a thing that's very funny that those people, a lot of them, hate on the foreigners, not people who give foreigners privilege.
Yeah.
You know, if a foreigner first came here without these expectations and they just got these special treatment from people, then they didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
And they suddenly got attacked by the rest of the people.
For me as a foreigner who lives here, like sometimes it gets exhausting to deal with, if I'm honest, because I don't like people who simp about the West. I also comment back at people that are like, oh, Denmark is the most amazing place in the world, like it's paradise, why would you have left? We've made videos where I literally talk about why that's not true and you shouldn't think that about any place. China's also not paradise, it's just a country. Everywhere is just a place. Different places fit different people, is my belief. Then I also, if I say anything, even mild about China, like for example that I personally prefer to eat not so sweet bread, which is an opinion many Chinese people share with me, you included, don't like sweet bread that much. Suddenly I'm being told like, oh, get the F out of my country, you foreigner, you guys always want special treatment. And it's like calm down. Like, why are you attacking me? And it's honestly very uncomfortable. There's been many situations of this. Like when I first came here very early in my experience here, I shared a story online. An uncomfortable experience I had when we visited Jiayi's hometown in Dongbei, where I got yelled at and called a slur. You think it's a slur too, according to Dongbeiren themselves, which is where the word comes from. But I just shared that, and I even in the post started out by saying like, love Dongbei, it reminds me of home. I feel very like comfortable here. I like the people, the food is awesome, like all these nice things. But I just said like, hey, being called something ugly like that for no reason made me feel very sad. Yeah. Like it makes you feel bad. And people were attacking me and being even more racist than the person who had said it at first. Yeah. And then said like, then go fucking home. I would never say that to an Asian person, and you wouldn't want people to say that to you as an Asian person. So why is it okay to say it to me when I'm just trying to live my life here? Like this mentality, I think, is unnecessary. And I understand fully that it must be so annoying to grow up. Like I saw in the West, like a lot of Asian people feel the need to kind of bow down. I understand this so well, and it made me very sad growing up seeing it, because I always thought Asian culture was beautiful and awesome and you should embrace it. So I understand that now that China's growing bigger and stronger, that some people are like, hey, I'm proud of being Chinese, and that's so awesome. Makes me so happy. I hope our kids can become just as proud as being Chinese. Jiayi is a very proud Chinese man. Yeah. It's part of what I like about him. So it just makes me feel sad when people get mad at me over something that I'm not even willingly participating in, you know?
If you don't like foreigners getting privilege, get mad at people who give the privilege. Yeah. Because a lot of foreigners don't want the privilege. And also, there's that you can treat people equally. There's more than two ways to treat people, not just look up and look down. There's
a middle ground.
Yeah, you look at them in an equal way.
I think watching our content, I hope people have noticed that we often compliment both countries and also criticize things that we feel like they could learn from each other, because nowhere is perfect. And I also feel sad because sometimes I see Chinese people commenting like, oh, I kind of wish that we could also do this, or maybe we should improve this here. And then people suddenly are like, oh, you suck up to the West. But this person is not even talking about the West. They're just talking about like, hey, I love my country, let's improve it. There's nothing wrong with that. We should all be able to have those conversations, because the way I see it, and the way I've seen the whole time, is, to me, China is awesome. Denmark is also awesome. Both can be awesome at the same time. It doesn't mean one is lower than the other. Just like you can like hot pot and you can like,
and we can't really
barbecue.
Yeah, and we can't really compare those two countries.
No, like and you can, But that doesn't mean it's like about who's better, is my mentality. You can compare things and have a useful discussion. Because there's many things I think Denmark could learn from China, and I'm sure there's also things that could go the other way. And I think privilege is never 100%, especially if you're a foreigner. We have talked about this in private before. I always say, if you run away from your country thinking you'll have more privilege elsewhere, you'll never have more privilege than where you ethnically belong. And that usually means where you have birthright, right? So me as a Dane, I'll never have more privilege than I do in Denmark. I'm a citizen there and I ethnically match my citizenship. So I'll say the exception would probably be if you're Chinese looking, born in Denmark. I bet you face some discrimination. Maybe it would be better in China, but I'm not sure. I can't answer for you. There's still obviously things that are negative to being a foreigner here. Like, for example, I have to carry around my passport. In Denmark, had Jay come there, he would have gotten a little card that would actually look exactly the same as mine. He just wouldn't have citizenship, but he would have the same ease of identification. It's not a big deal, but these things do exist. Or like my career prospects in China, just like most foreigners, is not as good as it would have been in Denmark. That's a thing you give up almost any time you move and become a foreigner somewhere.
Yeah, the job you can get is very limited. But our conclusion is, of course, foreigners have privilege in this country.
I have a way better life here as a foreigner living here than he would have if he was a Chinese man living in Denmark. Because there's so much discrimination. And I think that's important to bring into the conversation too, is mentioning that there is discrimination when it's the other way, which is why I think a lot of Chinese also feel anger towards this privilege that white foreigners especially have, because they don't receive the equivalent to this abroad. That's kind of what we had to say about the subject. We would love to hear what you guys think down in the comments and keep this conversation going, because I think it's interesting to hear what other people have to say. And I hope we'll see you guys for our next video. Bye!